So just welcome everyone to our session for this evening, and of course welcoming Bhante all the way from Sri Lanka. And we are very happy that we are today starting our program at the Western Sydney University. It's our first day, and I just want to thank them for offering this space to us, and importantly for us to reach the student community here as well. So we've got some friends joining us online as well as in person. And before I go any further, I'm going to introduce you to our MC for this evening, who is Sophia, and she will be doing the intro. So welcome, Sophia.
Hello. Hi.
Yeah, just being here.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'll be here then. Hi. Hello. Yeah, you get to see how short I am in person. Usually just floating head. Well, hello everybody. As Tina's mentioned, we're here in our new home, and welcome all of you here again in our virtual space and now in person as well. And as always, I invite you to come back to this present moment with all of us, with yourself, with your body, with everything that's going on, mental formations, the 5 aggregates, and observe what's happening within, as well as observe the Dharma, as Bhante Joe shares with us today, on the topic of practicing the Buddha's teachings from the Suttas to the heart. Yeah, how do we learn from the ancient teachings of the Suttas and apply them to our daily lives? So as we carry this very curious question with us, I'll do a little intro about Bhante Joe. So he was born in 1983 in London, Ontario, and was initially interested in business and computers. However, in high school, university, Bhante attended the Toronto Zen Buddhist temple. He eventually moved in and started training part-time to become a priest. But in 2006, he took up full-time training at the temple. However, an attraction to Theravada Buddhism pulled him towards the Thai forest tradition. He attended a day-long retreat with Ajahn Viram Hammo in 2007. At the retreat, he learned about the newly established Tisarana Buddhist monastery. He found his way to Tisarana and was ordained as an anagarika in 2008. In 2010, Bhante Joe was ordained as a bhikkhu with Ajahn Viradhammo as his preceptor. Bhante then trained at Tisarana until 2015 with 1 year in Thailand. In 2015, his teacher released him from dependence. He spent 6 months at a monastery in California and before returning to Toronto, Canada, between 2016 and 2019. So he currently resides in Sri Lanka. This will be an interactive session. As always, Bhante will do a little bit of meditation for us and introduction to the topic. And then Bharat will jump in to help us to facilitate a bit of a conversation. So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat virtually or raise your hand here in a in-person space. Or if you don't feel comfortable, you could, to share your question with everyone, you could also pop them the question directly to Tina, so Metta Center. And this session will be recorded and uploaded to YouTube. Without further ado, over to you, Bhante.
Okay, so just saying that this is actually, I think my second Zoom meeting ever. So I'm not too familiar with the format, but from the last was actually with the Metta Center, and it seemed like a nice way to meet with people. So I actually wasn't too sure how many people would be joining us today. I thought it just might be a few. So I'd originally suggested to Sinsin that maybe we just try to meet with everybody and just see who's here, see what backgrounds they're from, what they're interested in. But just looking at the screen there now, it seems like there's about 6 or 7 people. So that might take some time. So just switch gears a bit in that case. And basically, thought that the kind of format that we might be able to try would be just to, I'll give a little maybe intro to the meditation instead. And then there's a guided meditation that I've sent to Tina. If it comes through, that's great. If not, then I'll try to do one here. I have a bit of a sprained ankle, so that's That's why there's a video with the guided meditation. And following that, there'll be a little Dhamma talk and then a Q&A. So basically, the title of this talk, Practicing the Buddha's Teachings, it was kind of deliberately generic because the thing about practicing the Buddha's teachings is that there's no like single path that every single person takes to practice them. It's a kind of a thing where the Buddha has laid out parameters. He lays out, okay, this is too far. He lays out, this is too close. And in between the parameters that the Buddha lays out, each person has all these various paths that they have to take. So this is why the Buddha's teachings are not so much of a technical step-by-step thing that we do. It's more of a skill that we develop. And ideally, this is a skill that's developed in the company of good friends, in the company of Kalyana Mittas, the teachers that we have, and then also the people that we practice with. So actually, the way that the Buddha taught meditation was similar. It wasn't like a step-by-step thing that we do where it's just, okay, first you do this step, then you do this step, then you do that step, then you do that step. These days, actually, these kind of meditation techniques are very, very popular. You know, it's kind of it's quite popular to find a particular technique and then just think, okay, what do I do next? What's the next step? And actually, that's okay. It might work that way for some people, but what people may find is that some people get to step 1, step 2, step 3, and they're blocked. Okay, you know, I've gotten to step 3. I'm supposed to see a light nimitta. There's no light nimitta. So does that mean I'm a terrible meditator? So these techniques have their pluses and minuses, and where they sometimes come from is actually the personal experiences of practitioners. Practitioners practice meditation, and they get some results, and then they share those results with people. But people can't replicate the exact path that those people took. So what we're going to do here today in the guided meditation is a guided anapanasati meditation, guided breath meditation. So this guided breath meditation, one thing to keep in mind is that actually when we go through and do these steps, they're not necessarily like a step-by-step thing that everybody has to follow. It's better to look at the steps in this guided meditation as more of like a toolkit, you know, kind of a good carpenter. You know, he doesn't just put together, he or she doesn't just put together IKEA furniture, right? Kind of, what's the next step? What's the next screw to screw in? You know, and it's all laid out there in the diagrams in the IKEA furniture. A good carpenter can kind of look at a situation, know what type of building he has to build based on the environment that he or she is in, the ground, how it's level, or, you know, if there's water there, whatever it is. And then based on that, they can select the appropriate tools and the appropriate materials, and they can build anything they want. So in a similar way, we can think of meditation. This meditation that we'll do as a kind of a guided toolbox. You know, there are tools in a toolbox for you to use. And the tools that the reason that we're using these tools, what we're actually trying to build here is a stable mind. We're trying to build a mind that's prepared, a mind that's ready to see the insights that the Buddha taught. So to do that, it's actually not that complicated. There's kind of the instructions aren't that complicated. The practice is very complicated. So these tools that we're using the purpose of them is to eliminate the defilements in our own mind. So we'll go through and we'll do some of these guided meditations, but that's the thing to keep in mind, is that the main purpose, the main evaluation is this decreasing my defilements or not? If we're doing a technique and we're following step A, step B, step C, step D, then it doesn't really matter if we see a light nimitta if our defilements are going up. We're still getting just as angry. If we still have just as much suffering, it doesn't really matter. Also, sometimes people go on retreats and they have these really excellent experiences, like they'll see a light nimitta on the retreat, then they leave the retreat, they can't get it again. But they still talk to people like, oh, I had this experience on the retreat. So all the time we keep in mind the purpose for which we're meditating, which is to decrease our defilements. So I got a little request, a kind of a message. Can we do a shorter meditation because of time constraints? And that's no problem. In that case, maybe what I'll do is just a 15-minute guided meditation, 15 or 20 minutes or so. And then we can do the Dhamma Talk and the Q&A. So when we read the guided meditation that we'll do is breath meditation. And when we read the Anapanasati Sutta, it has these kind of very broad categories to it, almost kind of breathe in and out, calming and relaxing the body. Breathe in and out. One should breathe in and out feeling rapture. One should breathe in and out feeling pleasure. There's all these kind of, the instructions in the sutta are quite broad. So one will find that as one goes to practice meditation, tries to stay with the breath, make it calm, try to make one's mind calm so that it doesn't wander to the past, doesn't wander to the future, that various kind of obstructions come up. And using these various tools, you can try to overcome them. But if it doesn't work, then sometimes one has to try a different tool. So in doing this, the first one, the ones that we're mainly going to focus on, because it's very short, is learning to calm and relax the body, trying to learn to breathe maybe with the whole body if we get to that, and basically just trying to stay with the breath, probably what everybody here has practiced many times before. So a slight difference here is that we're going to use our imagination. So there's many different ways to approach meditation, and what one finds is that the way that one conceives things actually affects the way that one meditates. So when one conceives of the breath as just being air that comes into the lungs, goes down to the lungs, and goes out through the nose, that's okay. But it places limits on the way that one can meditate. Some people may find that they have headaches and they can't do breath meditation. But this word anapanasati, pana in anapanasati, is probably related to the Sanskrit word prana. Now, prana doesn't just mean air. It also means a type of energy. So what we can learn to be aware of is not simply the air coming into our lungs, going out, but of this whole working of energy in our body that comes through the breath. And it's kind of, it comes in through the air, but it's also this kind of energy system. And that gives us a lot more to work with. What it means is that we can imagine the breath not just coming in and out of the nose, we can imagine it coming in and out of the chest, we can imagine it coming in and out from between the center of the eyebrows, from the top of the head. One can imagine it from any part of the body one likes. And that gives one more options to relax the body. So when the body is relaxed, when the breathing is calm, it also has an effect on the mind. So this is one of the special things about anapanasati, mindfulness of in and out breathing, or mindfulness of in and out prana, is that breathing is one of the few bodily processes we have conscious control over. And also one will find that when one changes the way that one breathes, when one changes one's perception of the breath, it also changes one's emotions. It also changes one's mind. So this is where we get these tools to work with our mind. When we're really, really angry, we breathe in a particular way. If we can learn to calm that, then we can also calm the emotions in our mind. When we're really, really calm, we breathe in a particular way. So we'll employ a few of these simple perceptions. That's probably enough of a preamble. Can get started with about 15 minutes of breath meditation. But that's the thing to keep in, one of the things that we can keep in mind is that we're going to use imagination here. We're going to be imagining the breath coming in and out, say, from the center of the chest, in and out from between the eyebrows, in and out from the top of the head. And the goal is to have a calm, comfortable breath where the mind is staying with it the whole time. And the places, the ways that people breathe that make them calm, they're different for everybody. It's kind of what we were talking about a bit at the beginning. So one can pay attention. Is it most comfortable to breathe from here? Most comfortable to breathe from the center between the eyebrows, from the nose? What rhythm of breathing is most comfortable? What rhythm of breathing makes my defilements go up and down? So with that in mind, let's start a little bit of meditation so we can lean forward a bit and arch the spine. If we don't have any broken ankles or sprained ankles, and look about 3 feet in front and close our eyes. And can focus in on the breath. Can know when it's coming in. And know when it's going out. If we breathe in a long breath, and just know I'm breathing in a breath. And if we breathe in a short breath, can just know I'm breathing in a short breath. And can focus in on the breath at the tip of the nose. And if notice any patterns of tension or tightness around the nose, around the face, you can just let those relax. And relax any patterns of tension around the cheeks, around the chin. And can practice breathing in and out from this area at the tip of the nose. And when breathing in and out from the tip of the nose, it can be good to make mindfulness as continuous as possible. Being aware all the way through the in-breath. As the in-breath turns to the out-breath. All the way through the out-breath. And as the out-breath turns back to the in-breath again. Trying to keep mindfulness as continuous as possible. Sometimes one can imagine the breath almost as if it's in front and one is watching it. But instead, one can change perception and imagine almost as if one was right in the center of the breath. A bit like one was standing under a waterfall. So on the in-breath, one can just imagine being totally immersed by the breath. On the out-breath, one can imagine being totally immersed by the breath. And can shift attention a bit. This time up to the area between the eyebrows. And if notice any patterns of tension or tightness between the eyebrows, along the brow ridge, you can just let those relax. And can relax any patterns of tension around the orbits of the eyes, the eye sockets. And can practice breathing in and out from this area between the eyebrows. And when breathing in and out from between the eyebrows, it can be good to change one's perception of the breath so that it's not just air that one is pulling in and out of the lungs, but it's a kind of energy that's all around and coursing through one's body. And it's possible for one to pull it into and out of any part of the body one might like. So on the in-breath, you can just imagine breath energy coming into this area between the eyebrows. On the out-breath, you can imagine breath energy exiting from this area between the eyebrows. Almost like there was a little mouth there. And can shift attention again. This time up to the crown of the head. And this is just the area at the top of the head in the center. And if one notices any patterns of tension or tightness at the crown of the head, you can just let those relax. And can relax any patterns of tension down the sides of the head to the jaw bones. And can relax any patterns of tension down the back of the head to the base of the neck. And can practice breathing in and out from this area at the crown of the head. Almost like there was a little mouth there. So on the in-breath, you can just imagine breath energy coming into the crown of the head. On the out-breath, you can imagine breath energy exiting from the crown of the head. And can shift attention again. This time back down to the tip of the nose. And can watch the breath there for a bit. And can shift attention again. This time down to the center of one's chest. And this is just the area to the right of the heart in the center. And if one notices any patterns of tension or tightness around the center of one's chest, and just let those relax. And one can relax any patterns of tension on the left side of the chest, the muscles between the rib cage, the muscles behind the ribs. One can let those relax. And one can relax any patterns of tension on the right side of the rib cage. Muscles around the ribs. Muscles between the ribs. One can let those relax. On the in-breath, one can imagine breath energy coming in. gently working its way into the muscles, relaxing the muscles. On the out breath, you can imagine breath energy gently exiting. And you can bring attention back to the center of the chest. And can practice breathing in and out from there. Just imagining breath energy coming in on the in-breath, the center of the chest. Exiting on the out-breath. Almost like there was a little mouth there. And from this area at the center of the chest, one can let one's awareness expand until it fills the whole body. And one of the metaphors the Buddha gives for spreading feelings through the body in the canon is like a lake with an underground source. And the water comes up from the underground source and fills the whole lake. And in a similar way, one can allow awareness to spread from this point at the center of the chest until it fills the whole body. And with awareness filling the whole body, one can practice whole body breathing. And when practicing whole body breathing, it can be good to change one's perception of the breath. So that it's not just air that one pulls in and out of the lungs, but it's a kind of energy that's all around. And it's possible for one to pull it in and out of every pore, almost like one's body was a big sponge. So on the in-breath, one can think whole body. On the out-breath, one can think whole body. And before we finish meditating, can spread thoughts of goodwill, wishing may all beings all around everywhere be happy and at ease. May they put in place the causes necessary to be happy and at ease. And we can make the mind infinite, can make it unbounded, all the way to the ends of the universe and beyond, in every dimension. May all beings all around everywhere be happy and at ease. And can open our eyes and do a short Dhamma Talk followed by a Q&A. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang saranang gacchami, dhammang saranang gacchami, sanghang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami, dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami, dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami, tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami, tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Very good. So it's kind of funny, these doing these Zoom calls. I wonder if I can switch the view, see what people look like. Okay, there we go. Because doing these Zoom calls on the spotlight mode, I'm just looking at my own face when I talk. So it's hard to see people's reactions. So the topic of this talk is practicing the Buddha's teachings. And it's a very broad topic, right? It's kind of basically, to sum it up, that's the topic. And there's a lot that one can say about it. One of the very first things that one should know about practicing the Buddha's teachings is it basically starts with an aspiration. Sometimes one comes to practice the Buddha's teachings, one doesn't necessarily know why right away. It's kind of, one is suffering, or maybe one's a little bit curious, or whatever it might be. But in the background of this all the time, actually, there's a goal that people have. There's a reason that they're doing things. And if they come to practice the Buddha's teachings for a particular reason, it takes their path in a particular direction. It's like, imagine somebody decides they're going to get in their car and just drive wherever they like. I knew somebody who liked to do that sometimes. You just get in his car and go for drives. And also I like to go for walks sometimes, and that's okay. Kind of get your feet going, get walking, or get in your car. And sometimes you might end up in some beautiful parks. Sometimes you might end up in a monastery. And sometimes you might end up in some rough neighborhoods. As long as the walk is pleasant, then people keep doing it, right? If it's unpleasant, then they start thinking they should go home. So the practice of the Buddha's teachings can be similar in this way. If one doesn't really know why one is practicing them, if one doesn't know what purpose one is doing it for, just one kind of wants to test it out, that's okay. What will tend to happen is that one will do it as long as it's pleasant, as long as it's something that's easy to do. So the very first thing in terms of practicing the Buddha's teachings that is probably the most helpful thing for people who really want to see what the Buddha taught is to have a sincere aspiration. So one of the things is that the reason that the Buddha taught was to help people find an end to suffering. So one can develop this aspiration. I want to find the end of suffering in the dispensation of this Buddha, in the dispensation of the Buddha Gautama. So in other words, it's very clear what one is doing and why one is doing it. And this clarity can help a lot. Because as we were talking about a little bit at the beginning, each person has a kind of different path to go through to try to get to their goal. Now we've kind of talked a little bit about the very first part, the establishment of the goal. It's like putting a pinpoint on Google Maps or putting a pinpoint on a map. Now we know where we got to go. We're going towards Nibbana. It's not just where we're going for a drive in the country because it's nice, right? I mean, that's okay. It's not bad to do. But there's a pinpoint on the map. We're going somewhere and we're going there for a reason. Now imagine that there's this map, right? So now this is kind of neat. This Zoom call, I can see there's 8 people here and I can see people's faces. That's kind of neat. So imagine that all the people here were at these different pinpoints on this map, right? Some person was north of the center of where we want this pinpoint. Another person's east of it, right? Another person's west, another person's south. And each place has different obstacles. Huh? Imagine coming from the south, you've got a big lake, right? Imagine coming from the north to the center, you've got a big desert, right? Oh, 28 people. Okay, I just got a message. Okay. Obviously, I'm still new to Zoom. Anyways, imagine coming from the west, you've got another obstacle, maybe a mountain range. So now we've got this metaphor, we've got this map, right? We're all trying to get to the center. We're all trying to get there, but each of us are in different places on the map. Each of us are in a different location. And what that means is that our path to get to the center is going to be different. So if I tell you guys, look, I went along this road and it was really good. You know, I kept going. I got to this place and this place and this place. You guys go along this road too. You might start traveling and going along your road and see none of these signposts at all. See none of the same things that I saw at all. And you can think to yourself, wait a minute, this is wrong. I'm doing something wrong. Something isn't right. So this metaphor is given for a reason. It's because it can be very inspiring. Once we set this goal, I want to attain Nibbana, to read about the progress that other people make, right? To listen to the way that they've meditated and the results that they get. It's very excellent. It's wonderful. But one of the things is that not all of us are going to be able to follow the same path that they took. We're at different points on the map. And if we get in our car, we get on our feet and start walking and we're not seeing the same things that they saw, doesn't necessarily mean we're taking a wrong road, right? It just means that it's our road, not theirs. So I remember when I first went to live at the monastery, I was a young man. I was 25 when I joined a Theravada monastery, but I was 21 when I first went to a Zen monastery. And I'm 40 now. It was kind of a long time ago. And I remember first going to, especially the first one, the Zen monastery I went to. And, you know, you read all these things in the books and the texts, and you think, oh, this is great. I'm so inspired. And the first thing you do when you're getting there is you're getting scolded. You didn't put this rag in the proper place. Wait a minute, you left the door unlocked. What are you doing? You know, you're sitting there as a 21-year-old thinking, oh, I could be going to university. You know, I have all these different things I could be doing. You know, why am I here? You know, I'm getting yelled at about where to put rags and, you know, telling I'm not mindful and these different kind of things. So the Buddha, what he established for people wanting to advance in his discipline was actually an apprenticeship system. So when we want to advance, it's not necessarily that we just have the map. We also have to look for a guide. We also have to look for somebody who's skilled in the principles of traveling themselves so that they can give us specific advice, so that they can give us tailored advice to our situation. It's very important because otherwise we're just going by some general principles and we may do something small that doesn't seem that big and end up in a lake or end up in a desert. By the way, here's a funny story I heard about some people who, some kids, they were driving in a car and they trusted their GPS so much, it told them to turn right one time and they turned right off the road and they just kept going in their car. They ended up in a marsh, just trusting this GPS, right? So this is why it's very important to have a live guide. You kind of put too much faith in a technique, too much faith in what we've heard about other people and just try to follow it blindly, we can ignore some really important signposts. So staying with this teacher when I was a young man, I didn't like it initially, but later, after 3 or 4 years, I began to see that what he was telling me was correct. Now, what we're trying to do here, the path that we're actually walking, it's not a physical road. It's a path where we transform our characters and we transform our lives, right? This is where the Buddha's teachings is so much more than a meditation technique. It involves so many things, and we're talking about one of the first things, one of the most helpful things is to have a good guide and also to find good people to travel with. So I think here, the Metta Center, there's a group, people do things together, they meditate together. It's very good to have this kind of group support. It's much easier to avoid wrong roads when you're traveling with a group of people to a certain extent. Now, wait a minute, you're going down the wrong way here. You know, the whole group has a certain group making decision. So it's good to have these kind of kalyana mittas. This is a very important aspect of practicing the Buddhist path. Now, having said that, these kalyana mittas are very important. These guides are very important. The interesting thing about the Buddha's teachings is that although there's something that we can learn from other people, for each person who walks the Buddhist path, they have to do it themselves. So there's a very famous story about a young man who went to stay with Longta Mahabua, who was a famous Thai master in Thailand. I'm not too sure how many people are familiar with the Thai forest tradition, but he was the most famous, arguably, living in Thailand. Ajahn Chah was also very famous, but he was, we would say, like the most revered forest master. So there was this young man from America who got the opportunity to stay with him. And he went to stay with him and he asked Longta Mahabua, he said, "So what should I do to attain enlightenment?" And Longta Mahabua said, "Well, I know it worked for me. I don't know what's going to work for you. I'd advise you to try different things. And if you find something that works, keep doing it. And if you find something that doesn't work, stop doing it." This was the advice from the most revered forest master in Thailand. So one of the things that we're going to find when we set out on our path is it requires an all-around protection. It requires an all-around training. Buddhism is something that you can enter from almost any point. You can start going for a drive and end up in the country, but when you really want to get to the center of the city, it can take a lot of different skills. Getting around the roadblocks, you might have to get out and walk, you might have to fix your tire, and it's each up to us. So one of the things that we're going to find is when we first start to do things, one of the most basic, most important is to very strictly keep the 5 precepts. I think everybody here knows what they are. So it sounds like something very basic. And actually here in Sri Lanka, it's quite interesting because you say this to people, like, you got to keep the 5 precepts. It's like, oh yeah, we know all that, right? People have been Buddhists since they're very young. Then you get to know them and you find out they're telling lies. And then you see what they're doing. Like, wait a minute, you just took this thing from government land. That doesn't belong to you. You can't take it. So that's just the way it is. So the 5 precepts is not something that's unique to Sri Lanka. This is everywhere in the world that this can happen. It seems like something very, very simple, but when we actually try to keep them strictly, it cuts off a lot of outlets in our life. I remember when I was a young man and I first started to try to keep the 5 precepts really strictly, one thing that I found was I started losing friends. All the friends that one has, they like to go out and party, they like to go out and drink, right? Like to sometimes have a good time. And so if you're all of a sudden not doing those things, you're the only non-drunk person in a group of drunk people, you kind of stand out. So this applies all the time. Those small glasses of wine that one has at Christmas, right? The small white lies that one might tell to one's husband or to one's friends or whoever it be. These 5 precepts have to become an all-around protection. They have to be something that cuts off this behavior from all angles. And when they do, what starts to happen is it changes one's life. It changes the way one lives one's life. And this is the true radical part of the Buddhist teachings. So this is the first thing. Now, it's another interesting thing we're on the precepts is that I've been kind of doing some research, looking into it, kind of very curious, because in the Buddhist time, there was all these lay people who were once returners, non-returners, you know, they had all these various attainments. One of the biggest differences between the time of the Buddha and now is not just that it was an agrarian society or whatever it might be. When we look at the Buddha's recommendations in the canon for lay people, one of the biggest things that he recommends is the keeping of the 8 precepts once a week. It comes across so strongly all over the place in the suttas. Now, I was telling you guys, I've been a monk now for a while. I've been involved in Buddhism since I was 21. I've never met one person, not one, who keeps the 8 precepts once a week. I haven't met a single person. So this is a really big, what we call like grass at the corral gate. Anybody wants to advance in the Buddhist teachings as a lay person, don't have to look too far in many different places. One can try to keep these 8 precepts once a week, every single week, and see if one can do it. All the various excuses that the mind comes up with not to keep the 5 precepts, not to keep the 8 precepts, this is us going along our path. This is when it starts to transform our life. And this brings us back to the very first part of what we were talking about a bit, that one has to have a really strong reason for walking the Buddhist path. Because when one starts to do these things, it gets a bit uncomfortable, right? It's not always the most comfortable thing. So it's like going for a drive. You have to know you want to get to the center of the city, that if one starts getting into traffic, one starts getting into rough neighborhoods, one doesn't turn back. One keeps going. And some of the first rough neighborhoods, some of the first difficult things we're going to encounter is strictly keeping these 5 precepts, trying to keep the 8 precepts once a week. If I ever met somebody who did that, I mean, it's very hard to do as a layperson. I know. I tried to do it when I was a layperson. One of the first things you find is you start losing weight. And then people start to relate to you different because you're skinny, right? On my Instagram app, there's all these like really buff guys doing workouts. If you're a skinny guy, people don't really like that. They start to treat you bad. So that pulls you away from the world, right? So this is one of the things that we find. So once we have the precepts established, once we start keeping them strictly, the next thing the Buddha instructs us to do, I mean, these don't all have to go in an exact order, right? But it's to practice meditation. Can imagine a bit like my grandfather in Canada. My grandfather, Canada used to have all these really humongous trees. And before they wanted to, my grandfather, when he was young, he used to go and saw these trees down and they would pay him in lumber. Canada was a really poor country, relatively poor country at that time. So in any event, because these big trees were there, they couldn't make any fields and they couldn't plant seeds. But once they cut down the trees, they could plant seeds. So in a similar way, as long as we aren't keeping these 5 precepts, it's like having all these big trees in our path. We can try to plant seeds. They might grow a little bit, but they'll probably grow a little bit stumpy. Sometimes they might not grow at all. But if all the ground is cleared, the sun can shine on it, then we can plant seeds. So the next thing that we try to do is to plant seeds with meditation. Now, this is where these things can become very individual. We notice that there's various things that pull us off. So right now we just did this kind of anapanasati meditation, this kind of meditation on mindfulness of breathing. One thing to know is that the Buddha taught many, many different topics in meditation. So many. In the commentaries, classically, it's 40, but almost any of the perceptions the Buddha recommends in the canon can be taken up as a meditation object. These meditations, they can be roughly, very roughly divided into 2 types. There's types of meditation that make the mind calm, and there's types of meditation where one practices particular perceptions, right? So we're talking a little bit about how everybody has these different characters. Everybody has a different character, and one will find that certain meditation topics just really gel. Certain meditation topics just really feel good. So the simile that the Buddha gives for this is the simile of a cook. So he says, okay, imagine that there's a cook and he lays out a whole bunch of curries on a table. Mm-hmm. So right now, by the way, I have this kind of sprained ankle, so I can't go out for Pindapata. According to the doctor's advice, I've got to stay in for 3 weeks. So the people who are taking care of me, they lay out all these dishes on the table. And when I go and I take certain dishes, I take more of them, they put more of that dish out the following day. They put out less of the dishes that I don't take from. This is the simile that the Buddha gives for picking up the theme of the mind, calls it the nimitta of the mind. The theme of the mind here is whatever topic of meditation feels good. Whatever topic of meditation feels like we're advancing, feels like we're moving forward. And this is something very individual, but it's something that we can all know for ourselves. We can all know pretty easily, right? For example, when I take certain types of food, if I eat mushrooms, I get this very bad reaction. I know it right away, right? But if I try to come up with a formula for that to apply to everybody, it wouldn't work. If I eat other types of food, for example, watermelon is very good for my stomach, then I know it right away. This is very good for me. It's very easy to tell. So whatever meditation topic we select, it should have this kind of gelling to it. It should have this feeling, this really works for me. This is something that feels good. So I remember, although I basically teach anapanasati meditation whenever I do guided meditations, actually in my own practice, I don't do anapanasati that much anymore. When I first started to meditate, for the first 10 years or so, I did anapanasati meditation. And it was kind of like a technique-based thing. The teacher was very strict. You've got to do it this way, this way, this way. It was good when I first started. But I remember first coming to Theravada Buddhism and going to Tisarana, and I learned, wait, there's all these different topics. I still remember the first time I tried Metta Meditation. I was like, whoa, this feels right. Also, there's another topic, Asubha. When I tried that one, it's basically these things just click, they just gel. It's like meeting a person who you really like, right? You just know right away. You can just tell. Then you develop that relationship further. So for each of you who've come here, after we protect the precepts, this is what makes meditation interesting. We can start with a really safe topic. The reason why I teach anapanasati at the outset is because it's very safe. You're not going to go wrong with it likely, right? You go wrong and your mind is wandering. With other meditation topics like Asubha and these various ones in the canon, people can actually go insane. So you don't want to do it unless you're a little bit experienced, right? The mind starts getting a little bit weird. Actually, I've been recently going to stay at cemeteries and going to autopsies. And there was an autopsy after the last one I went to. I was thinking, oh, this is enough. I better stop doing this for a while. So one wants to have a good basis in a solid topic like anapanasati first. If one is alone, if one has a teacher, one can be more experimental so that one knows when one is going off the road, right? We're driving along the road. We have to know where the rumble strip is. Wait, I've gone too far to the right. I better stop here. Move it right back to the center. It's very important because the mind can spin out in all kinds of ways. So now, having said this, having talked a little bit about choosing a meditation topic, let's just get a little bit more into the samatha and what they call vipassana. In the canon, it's called sannyas topics, because this might help you guys to choose, help you to play around when you're trying to find the topic that's right for you. So basically the ones that are mainly, we can say mainly samatha topics are ones where you basically just take a single object and you focus only on that object. That's it. You don't think about other things. When your mind wanders away, you bring it back to the object. That's all. That's all there is to it, right? It was very difficult to do. Sometimes you have to play around a bit. It still has these elements of vipassana to it, but it's mainly focusing in that way. The second type of meditation, and this type of meditation is not taught in the West that often. It's actually very rarely taught. But I'm going to teach it here to talk about it today, because there's certain types of people who, for them, this is the right road. Not everybody likes doing samatha. Not everybody has a character where that's going to be their main thing. So for those of you who have a kind of vipassana character, an analytical character, we'll talk about this a bit. So this second type of meditation, what it basically involves is taking a particular topic and bringing it up as a perception. The Buddha gives different ones, like the foulness of the body, mindfulness of death. He gives kind of the perception of impermanence, the perception of suffering, and there's so many ways you can do these. But what it means is that when you see, for example, I'll use the example of a Asubha. Then when one sees a body that they find attractive, they try to imagine that body, the loathsome things that are inside of it, like what's underneath. What do the organs look like? So when we think about the way that the mind usually works when it sees something it likes, right? Say somebody sees a form that they see beautiful. If they see a physical form they see beautiful. Usually what happens is one sees the form, then one can start thinking in so many different ways about that person's form. How many different love songs have been written, right? Like there's like 10,000. They're all about the same thing. There's 10,000 ways. The mind just thinks in all these different ways over and over again, this way, that way, this way, that way, this way, that way, thinking about how beautiful this person's form is. So for those of us who are a little bit more analytical characters, for people who are a little bit more inclined to this vipassana type, they have to turn this thinking on its head. Instead of thinking how beautiful the form is, they have to think, wait, how is this ugly? And then if that doesn't work, they come at it a different way. What's the heart look like? What's it look like inside? What's the blood systems look like? What does this look like as a corpse? And all the time they're watching, is lust increasing or lust decreasing? So this is where one can do vipassana We're going to bring this back because that's a really important point. When we're going along our path with meditation, the main thing that we want to see is not whether or not we had a nimitta. That's not so important. The main thing we want to see is whether or not our defilements are going up or they're going down. That's it. Is this meditation topic, well, that's not totally it, but is this meditation topic decreasing my defilements or increasing? Now, when you do this, right? When we as people do this, what we're going to find is that it's not a step-by-step process, but it is something that's very interesting. It is something that's very engaging, and when we do it, we gain a skill. This is where practicing the Buddhist teachings come from the suttas to the heart. They go from the suttas to the heart when we put them into practice in such a way that we see them for ourselves. We see for ourselves what they mean. We learn the skills of eliminating these things from our mind. All the different ways we can practice, we can imagine to make the mind calm. All the different ways we can practice, we can bring up perceptions to counter these defilements that come. One that comes through lust, for example, that comes through thinking things are permanent. When we learn these things, we have a skill. We're like that carpenter who can build anywhere. And this skill is for a purpose. The higher purpose of the Buddhist teachings is not just to keep sila. It's not just to get the mind into samadhi, to make the mind calm or to make the mind happy. It's to see with wisdom so that one's taints are eliminated. And this is where the Buddhist teachings are actually truly radical. In every society, at every time, in Sri Lanka, in Thailand, in the West, wherever it is, the true practice of the Buddhist teachings always goes against the grain. You can see this when you come to live in a Buddhist country. I mean, it's really wonderful. It's great. But if you really want to practice, you're eventually going to be separating from the group and going along your road alone. Now, one of the interesting things about the Buddha's road is that at first it starts off with these really nice things. Let's go for a drive in the country, right? Let's make the mind calm. But eventually what we realize is that all of the things that we're grabbing onto to make us happy are the same things that cause us to suffer. The same things that we grab are the same things that make us suffer. The Buddha gives this simile of a murderer. He says, imagine somebody came close to you and tried to become your friend. And because of that, you started to trust them, right? You started to let them into your house, let them into the various rooms in your house, let them come to your parties. You started to trust them. But then when they saw the opportunity, they would turn around and murder you because they were always an enemy in disguise. And he says in the same way, these 5 khandhas are basically, my memory of the sutta, an enemy in disguise. It's always murderous form. It's always murderous feeling. It's always murderous perceptions. It's always murderous mental formations. Consciousness, always murderous. They're always going to turn on us. All of samsara is like this. Whatever it is that somebody grabs has the potential to turn on them. And this is not necessarily something pleasant to contemplate. It's not something pleasant to see, which is why we always try to hide it. That's what avijja is, right? We hear avijja is the root of suffering. You know, when we go to eat some food that we really like and our mind is completely gone in the flavor, that's avijja. We don't want to see what it really tastes like. We really keep our mind there when we're eating this really delicious food we're obsessed with. All we taste is salty, we taste sweet. It's actually not that satisfying. And all these sensual pleasures, what the mind really wants is to escape. It wants to blank out. This is what avijja is. But people don't want to see it. Because when we really start looking for this, it doesn't just start in a book. It goes from the suttas and it comes out into our life. It comes out into our family. It comes out into our friends. It comes out into our job. It comes out into our car. Into everything that we know, into everything that we love, is thoroughly permeated by the fact that it can turn on us. It can turn on us with its impermanence. It can turn on us with its suffering. It can turn on us because it's not ours. It doesn't belong to us. So in practicing the Buddhist path and going along this road, we sometimes come to a cliff. And below that cliff is nothing but mist. Looking back is the road that we came. Looking ahead is something completely uncertain. And if we want to go forward, we have to jump into the mist and see what's there. We have to let go of our life. We have to let go of our body and mind. We have to let go of everything that we love to see what lies beyond everything that we love, because everything that we love can turn on us. So practicing the Buddha's teachings in this way, all phenomena are impermanent, right? That's in the suttas. All conditioned phenomena are suffering, right? All conditioned phenomena are not self. When we go along trying to eliminate the defilements in our mind, this spreads out until it touches everything in our world, until it touches everything in our perception. And if we want to find something beyond that, we have to let all of that go. So this is where the path of the Buddhist teachings comes from, the suttas to the heart. It comes from the suttas to the heart in protecting sila, in doing whatever we have to do to protect it, cutting it off in all of its very small outlets. It comes from the suttas to the heart and taking up the topics of contemplation, of meditation that the Buddha recommended, and using them to eliminate our own defilements. When we learn how to do this, we've got our own knowledge, we develop our own skill. But it comes from the suttas to the heart when we turn our minds to wisdom and see that everything that we love is fully permeated with these characteristics. And if we want to go beyond them, then we're going to have to find a way. A way beyond everything that we know and love. And this is where the Buddhist teachings is radical. In every time and place, in every culture, only the people who practice the Buddhist teachings will come to know what it really is. Only the people who practice the Buddhist teachings will come to see what he taught. And what he taught is something radical. It's an end to suffering. It's a complete end to suffering. And it's always available, so long as we walk this path in the right way, in the way that he instructed us to the end of suffering. Okay, so I think leave that for reflection. And I think we have about 15 minutes left. So if there's any questions, then I can take questions.
Thank you so much, Bhante. This is Bharat. I'm going to be facilitating this Q&A session. So
Sure.
If anybody has a question, feel free to pop it into the chat. We did have a lot of gems by Bhante today. And I myself have a couple of questions to ask you, Bhante. But before that, we have a question in the chat, which is related to what you were talking about, the precepts. The question goes like, did the Buddha eat meat? So I would extend that to the precepts as well. Is it related to the precepts?
Yes, the Buddha ate meat. So actually, becoming vegetarian was one of the things that Devadatta tried to use to split the Sangha. So
among other things, yeah?
The most evil monk in the Buddha's dispensation tried to make everybody vegetarian. So basically, the Buddha allows monks to eat meat so long as they haven't seen, heard, or suspected that it's been killed specifically for them. If they have seen, heard, or suspected it's specifically been killed for them, they can't eat it. For lay people, they can't kill, right? So what you're going to find is, I mean, I was in economics, I was a business student before, so I'd take these economics classes. And certain things have what they call inelastic demand. Kind of boring everybody here. Cigarettes are like this. Certain drugs are like this, right? If you ban them, inelastic demand means if you ban certain things, all that's going to happen is it raises the price, and people are still going to find ways to get them, right? So when they banned alcohol in the States, it just created this big crime syndicate led by Al Capone, and they just couldn't ban it, right? People are going to find ways to consume it. So the Buddha has probably had a lot of foresight, not just trying to establish an all-around ban on meat for a couple reasons. One is that people will find a way to do it. The second is that monks rely on people for their alms food. So this is where he's drawn the line. So long as you as a layperson don't kill, so long as monks haven't seen, heard, or suspected meat's been killed for them, they can consume it. Yeah.
Bhante, an extension to that, is it okay to go to the supermarket and get meat for lay people?
Yes. Yeah, that meat hasn't been killed for you. If you go to a farm, if one goes to a farm and points at a chicken and says, kill this chicken, that's breaking the precept. Or if one goes to Red Lobster and chooses the lobster that one wants to eat and they pick it out of the tank and boil it, that's breaking the precept.
Exactly. That's exactly what I wanted to allude to.
Just one more on that precept. If you, the one for like, take something that's not yours, a couple of times I've walked through the city and just seen like a jumper or a jacket sitting on a bus seat with no name and no one on it. And I've grabbed it to give to a homeless person. What's the go with Because you're
Very good.
taking a jumper that's sort of sitting there, it's not actually yours, but you're giving it for the intention to give to a homeless person, so they've got, you know, a warmer jumper.
Bhante, did you hear the question?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, yeah, I did. That was a really good question. Yeah, so these are nice, refined questions about the precepts. For monks, if they did that, a lot of it would have to do with their perception, right? Like whether they actually perceive that jumper as abandoned or not. Like if you have doubts, if you think, does this belong to somebody? Have they just gone into the store? Then you shouldn't take it, right? So, but if you have a like if you think that really, like say the jumper's ripped and you've seen it there for 3 months and you figure somebody's abandoned it, and then you were to take that with that perception, that wouldn't count as breaking the precepts.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much, Bhante.
Yeah.
So there's a follow-up question for the meat, which I kind of expected. All meat in supermarkets has been killed for consumers. We're all. How would you answer that?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. On my YouTube channel, I did this video one time about eating meat. It had the most comments and the most back and forth that I've ever. So this was one of them. It's very common. Supermarkets. So yes, I mean, there is a certain logic to it that if we all stopped eating meat, then nobody would kill it, right? But as I mentioned, meat has an inelastic demand. It's probably just not something practical. Like if you follow that, the logic is probably just not practical. So in terms of has the meat at supermarket been specifically killed for us? No, it hasn't. That meat at the supermarket's been killed in general to sell. If you went to a slaughterhouse and specifically told the slaughterhouse person to kill a cow and cut it up for you, and you keep that meat in your freezer, that's breaking the precept. Buying meat from a supermarket wouldn't be.
Yeah, exactly. I hope that answered your question there. Another question we have in the chat, Bhante. Can you recommend a posture coupled with Anapanasati that would work better?
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
Is there a posture, a bodily posture that would work better when we are doing Anapanasati?
Generally, it's the classic posture probably that everybody knows, and here's where ideally one could sit in the full lotus with the back straight, head slightly tilted, looking 3 feet in front, and because it gives the breath to through the lungs and to circulate easily, so one doesn't have to sit through patterns of tension in the body. I just want to jump in there for a bit and say, this guided meditation that we did on Anapanasati, that comes from Ajahn Lee and Ajahn Thanissaro. They have very excellent instructions on that. So that's just a little side. So in terms of posture, that classic one you see Buddha statues doing, that's the best. If you can't do it, then the half lotus, one leg on the hip. If not, then the quarter lotus, one leg on the shin. If not, then the Burmese posture with 2 feet in front. And if not, then however you can sit so that you can be stable.
Thank you so much, Bhante. So you were previously talking about 2 different types of meditation practice, roughly speaking. The one is the samatha practice. The other one is the quote-unquote vipassana practice. So where would you put metta practice in these 2 categories?
It's mainly a samatha topic. I mean, all of these topics have like elements of both, right? Because, for example, imagine you're spreading metta to somebody and you're still getting angry, right? It's like, well, what went wrong there? What am I doing wrong? So there could be background perceptions you have about that person or about that situation that you're cultivating while spreading metta. So you have to let those go or change them. So this is why meditation is a skill. Metta is mainly something where you're staying focused on that object. But if it's not working, we've got to figure out why. Or if the mind is not staying with the object, we have to employ a different perception.
Right, absolutely. And going back to your analogy of the map given to us by the Buddha and us trying to figure out where we are going and whether we go in a group or whether we go alone. And you said finding a guide is quite important. So what are some of the characteristics that we should be looking into as a guide? Because I myself have been a Buddhist for 10 decades, and I found teachers who are been initially really great, and then you just think that doesn't really fit with me.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a good question. So finding a guide is a bit like, one imagines, basically imagine finding people that one has liked and had good relationships before with in the past, right? So basically in the suttas, the recommendation is it should be somebody who you associate with them. Your good qualities go up, your bad qualities go down. So it's very simple in the suttas. In real life, the way that it tends to play out, like especially as a monk, for example, as a young monk, I still have all these flaws. And as a young monk, you've got teachers who point them out to you, right? And there was one teacher I had, he would tell me everything really correctly, like what he said was right. I mean, I could, later on, looking back at it now, I can see, what he was telling me was really excellent. But I just couldn't get it, like the way that it wasn't any flaw in him. It was something to do with our connection, right? Like it didn't penetrate for me, although I agreed with him. And, but then I met another teacher, and the way that he spoke to me, like the way that he did things, somehow I was just able to learn from him really easily. So this isn't a judgment that one passes, like, is this person a good teacher? Is this person a bad teacher? It's more of a connection issue. And one meets somebody and the way that they say things, the way that they teach resonates. When one hangs around them, one's defilements go down. That's the teacher to associate with. It's very simple. The other thing to mention about teachers is that it shouldn't be something casual, right? Like this is somebody who's really helping you, really helping us. So whatever they give us, one should be really grateful, and then also be there to help that person. This is what really matures that relationship of teacher-student. When it's not just something where it's like a shopping expedition, right? This teacher's no good, right? Like once one learns something from somebody, one is gaining benefits from them, one should try to stay with them for a while, even if they sometimes do things one doesn't like, because the only really perfect teacher was the Buddha. One stays with them out of gratitude, so long as one's defilements are going down and one's good qualities are increasing. And even if that stops, one still relates to them certain ways out of gratitude for what they've done. So that's a really important element in the teacher-student relationship.
Very well said, Bhante. Thank you so much. I can't reflect on it and say that, there have been phases during which, say, Anapanasati worked for me, but at the moment, just like you, I don't practice Anapanasati. So where would we draw the line? I mean, it seems like, something that works for us in the past may not work now. Is it because we transformed, or the technique doesn't suit us? How do we understand that?
And Bhante, can I add?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it can. Yeah, sure.
Just to add a different dimension, and when is it a situation where it may be actually our hindrance or defilement coming up, such as the hindrance of doubt coming up? So how do we know whether the technique works or whether it may be a hindrance that is arising? Thank you.
Yeah, these are all very good questions. So in the West, we tend to have very strong intellectual training, right? Like now the West is everywhere. It's West, East, and South, right? Australia and Canada are different parts of the world, but we call them the West. Any of these places that have this kind of cultural foundation, they have this kind of education system that trains according to thinking. So Westerners are very good with this type of thinking. But when it comes to knowing like the tipping points, is this because of doubt? When should I change a meditation topic? Like, is this because of a hindrance, or what is it? At a certain point, one actually has to employ one's intuition. So it's a bit like traveling along the road. One's got the map, one can try to know every turn, but actually one of the really important elements is a compass, right? It doesn't give really specific directions, but it tells you if you're going in the general right direction. And in a similar way, there's not really so much one can say about it. One has to develop this inner compass where one just feels like this is right. This is the right road to go along. It has to be, these things have to come together, both the intellectual reasons and sometimes just the feeling is there. So for myself, there's been many times in my monastic life where intellectually I haven't wanted to do something, and I felt that it was really, just rebelling against it horribly intellectually. But in my stomach, like my feeling was that I really have to do this. And so I basically did it. And it was only years later, looking back on that I learned the intellectual reasons for it. So when we try to decide whether to stay with a meditation topic, stay with a teacher, whatever it is, For people who've had this Western training, in making that decision, learning to employ this intuition, this inner compass, is going to be really important.
Absolutely, Bhante. So intuition is really the key, along with the intellectual reasoning, because we can't really let go of our critical thinking altogether. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, certainly. Yes, definitely. Yeah, both of them, they're like tools, right? They each have their place to solve different problems.
Thank you so much, Bhante. So we have another question in the chat, perhaps the last one. Do monks accept lay people as disciples who practice the higher training?
The higher training, that one I didn't, could you repeat that? What do you mean by that?
I'm just going to refer it back to the suttas. I think the disciple in higher training, the Seka.
Oh, so somebody who's basically, yes, there are monks, most monks will accept lay people as disciples, monks who are ready and willing to teach. So yeah, most monks will do that. They have lay people who are their disciples and who have a good fit with them, and basically they develop a relationship with them and they get to know them over a period of years. So it's much easier to tell because of that when they're doing something good or they're doing something that's not good. So there are monks who develop relationships like that with lay people. Yes, it's very common. Yeah.
Wonderful, Bhante. We have a question from the audience here.
Bhante, thank you for sharing the Dhamma Talk. In regards to your previous comment as to whether the compass is working or not, and you mentioned gut feel and intuition, could I beg to differ and just say that the compass could be comprised of greed, hatred, and delusion? That could be the thermostat. If you're on the right track, the qualities of greed, hatred, and delusion decrease. And if you're on the wrong track, the qualities of greed, hatred, and delusion. So this compass, if I may, would actually guide us, because a lot of the times, and being on this Dhamma journey so far as well, a lot of people get very attached to a certain technique, and in that process, they increase their defilements, and they have all these rigidity and hardness around their persona that they cannot see for themselves. But it's clear from the outsider that they're so caught up and wrapped up in their own defilements of their own creation. So lacking that compass, if I may, of being a good judge of their own qualities of greed, hatred, and delusion. What do you think?
Yes, that can play into it. These things, like basically we're talking in metaphors here, right? Because what we're actually talking about can have so many different dimensions that you can't just break it down really. I mean, everybody can kind of easily understand the metaphor of a compass, probably. I mean, it points in a general direction, and also the metaphor of gut feeling. So the thing that's different about the compass that we have in our practice, the intuition that we have in our practice, is that yes, it is informed by intellectual observation, right? Like it is informed by our past experiences. The intuition doesn't just exist in a vacuum. The intuition that we have is sometimes arises quickly, but it arises in response to stimuluses that we've had in the past and that we've processed in the past in various ways. So your point about observing greed, hatred, and delusion, and that tying into the compass, yes, that's relevant. Just for the sake of simplicity, you can call it gut feeling, right? I mean, it's a word, but it's something that you know. This really feels right. Like when you meet somebody that you really like, you just click with them, it really feels right. When you eat a type of food that's really good for your body, it really feels right, right? There's all kinds of things that can go into that, but here we're emphasizing the feeling aspect of it, the gut feeling aspect of it, because this is a very important tool in determining when we're going in a road that's skillful or not skillful. It's not the only tool, but it is an important one.
Thank you, Bhante. And may I add that your presence here feels very right for Metta Center. So thank you very much.
It's nice to meet with everybody virtually. It's been a nice discussion. It's been lovely to meet with all you. So, yeah.
Adding to that, Bhante, I can't believe this is your second Zoom talk. You have such a good Zoom presence, by the way.
Well, I had a lot of trouble logging in. Did I have trouble logging in and turning on my microphone or something? So.
Fine, it's okay.
Perfect. You're perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so
It
much.
all worked out.
Can I invite you to share merit with us before we close the session and also announce things later on?
Sure. So a short chant then.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Okay, I'll do it. I'll do a short chant to wish everybody well, although my voice is a little bit gone, so it'll just be a monotone. Abhivadana silisa nichang vadhapachayino chattaro dhamma vadanti ayuvanno sukhang balang ayurarogya sampatti sagga sampatti evacha to nibbana sampatti iminate samijjatu. On that. That's all.
Thank you,
Sadhu.
Bhante. And now, Sophia?
So I would like to, as Farad said, thank you, Bhante, very much for joining us on our very first session in Western Sydney University. I think this talk personally is very enlightening in a way. It helps me to understand how to know how to use your intuition. That's not something that I've heard a lot about. So actually trust your intuition, your feelings when you're doing your practice. To use that to guide you, knowing which method to use and continue with. And like the 8 precepts one was also very, like that's the first time I've heard about it. Should we do most of the readings? So I put in my calendar like to once a week, try to follow the 8 precepts.
Challenge accepted, Bhante.
Oh, very good. I'll be very happy.
Yes. Looking forward to seeing you again at our Metta convention, which is coming up in 1 month's time. And I'll get Xing to talk a little bit more about that later. But first of all, before that, next week we have another Wednesday talk at 7 o'clock, 7 to 8:30. Actually, we have throughout the week like talks, meditation, yoga sessions next week. So we have meditation for free on Monday between 7 to 8:30. That's online and in person. We have free yoga on Tuesday between 6:30 to 7:30 in person as well. And we have a free talk as well. Do we know what the topic is? Not. Okay, that's okay. Just come back. It will be a surprise. Or you can find it out in our mailing list and online on mettacenter.com.
What do we call it these days? Wednesday Wisdom Series.
Wednesday Wisdom Series retreat. Yep. And then we have also a 9-day retreat coming up with Bhante Ananda and Metta Nanda. So today Bhante talked a little bit about metta practice, and so this retreat will be actually exploring the method of metta twin. So like a metta object as an object of meditation. So if you're interested in exploring that, the link is in the chat.
Can I just say, that's going to be in the Blue Mountains, and we are flying in the 2 months to do this retreat. So it's going to be very, very special, and I really encourage people to come. If you can't come for the whole 9 days, you can also just come for the weekend. So you practice at home during the work week, and then you come back on the weekend as well if you like to do that.
Yeah, and then Susan, did you want to talk a bit about the Metta convention?
Yeah, I think it's been covered. So thank you so much, Bhante Joe. For those who are interested to listen to Bhante Joe again, Bhante will actually be speaking at the upcoming Metta convention. All the information has been posted in the chats. I think you'll be on a panel, right, Bhante, with Brother Tenzin on the topic of
that's right.
the beauty of wandering. Yeah, perhaps if you want to say a few words, you can about the topic. But thank you again.
Sure. Yeah, it's going to be a panel discussion, I guess. We're going to discuss the traditional Theravadan practice of wandering and how it relates to the Buddhist goal. So that's just a few words on it.
Awesome.
Thank you. Looking forward to it, Bhante. Yeah.
Great. Well, I think that's all the announcements we have for tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Get well soon, Bhante.
Okay. Thank you. Very good. Okay. Thank you, guys. Bye for now.
Bye. See ya.